Suzanne Staiert for many years worked as a Deputy Secretary of State in Colorado. Now she's with the Maven Law Group. But more importantly, she is one of those activists who tries to keep government open for all of us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for
I wanted
having
to
me.
ask you specifically about the petitions that are now allowed online. What I mean is, I put things on the ballot, and I have to go out and get 100,000 or 120 whatever thousand valid signatures to get a petition turned into a ballot initiative. The governor recently said, you can do this online, and we can do it under these circumstances. You're representing a bunch of folks saying, no, you can't. Why is that?
Well, we have a couple different groups and a couple different cases, but we're representing a group in district court right now challenging his executive order for a few different reasons. Number one, he waited until after the stay-at-home order to issue it. He issued it during the safer-at-home order, and it's really kind of curious to everybody what it is that he thinks can't be accomplished in person now that has to be done online.
Well, let me jump on that. As a guy who gets things on the ballot, and I've done it now for decades, it is an art to get these petitions signed, at least if you don't have a whole lot of money. And I never have a whole lot of money, so I'm always scraping to try to get these things on. And after Corona, if it's harder to approach people at parking lots and outside of King Soopers, there would be no summer festivals, no Red Rocks, no state fairs, no county fairs. I would love the idea of saying, just go on to the website, say you want this on the ballot, and that way it's easier for me, and we can verify that those are the people. What's wrong with that idea?
Well, first of all, I don't know that you can verify that those are the people. But secondly, we are 1 year, 9 months into a process to get things on the ballot. I mean, that is a 2-year cycle. And 1 year, maybe 1 year, 10 months now. 1 year, 10 months into it, we are going to give an advantage to all the people who waited till the last minute. And they can all go collect signatures to get on the ballot. Electronically.
I waited till the last minute.
I know, too bad.
Mine was like the very last initiative put on to reduce the tax flat tax.
Right, but what about everybody who submitted one way back when, and now they have that window, that 6-month window where you have to submit your petitions within 6 months when you set the ballot title? So none of those people they're allowing on. I had an initiative that Greg Brophy and I ran, got a ballot question to eliminate the daylight savings, change the clocks. We did that about 1.5 years ago. We don't get to do that. We don't get to go collect signatures now.
You didn't have to worry about Corona. You had your 6 months pre-Corona, and you couldn't do it.
But that's not even what we're hearing out in the field. I mean, our signature people that are out in the field right now are telling us that people are not hesitant to come and sign signatures. I mean, people are anxious to talk. They're anxious to get out and do things and feel normal again and interact with people live and in person. And so out at these grocery stores and places where people collect, there's plenty of people coming in and out of those places and plenty of people that are willing to stop and talk about the political process. And so to advantage a certain group over other groups, which we have other evidence that that's what he's doing, that's a big problem.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you have a problem with online petition gathering? This is to get initiatives and constitutional questions on the ballot, or do you have a problem with the way this one is being done?
I actually have a problem with both. I don't think the Constitution contemplates this kind of process. I mean, the Constitution talks about signing it in person. There has to be an affidavit. I mean, in your person, it says there has to be an affidavit attached to the sheets of paper. I just think if you're going to change the process, you should go back to the voters to change the process, not change it by an executive order.
Couldn't you argue that the Constitution on the federal level didn't contemplate the internet or television or radio or all sorts of things that still are part of the First Amendment? It didn't contemplate digital data in the cloud when we were talking about our personal effects and our papers. So doesn't that kind of fit into that?
I don't think it does, because everything in Colorado, all the case law and all the interpretations of those sections of the Constitution have always been about, signature gatherers who see the person sign it while they're standing there, and they can verify that that was in fact the person who signed the piece of paper, and that the petition itself never left their site while they were circulating it. And so all of that goes out the window if you're signing online. And then to do a process where we don't even know what the process is going to be. You can't do signatures online right now because the executive order just authorizes the Secretary of State to pass rules that haven't been passed. Those rules, we can imagine, are going to be passed on an emergency basis without input from anybody else. And so they're just making up a process here, in a 1 or 2 week cycle for something that we've spent hundreds of years building.
Are you doing this just so I can't get my initiative on the ballot? I want to lower our flat rate income tax. You don't care about it, and so you're just trying to stop me. Because this could help me.
This could help you, but the other person that it hurt was another client of mine, which is the late-term ban on late-term abortion. He specifically exempted them from his order. And so this kind of
governor, when you say the governor exempted him from the order, what do you mean?
Well, the order goes through its directive A through K, and when you get to the directive K, it says this order does not apply to anybody who has already turned in their signatures. But what that really means is our initiative, because we are the only ones who turned in signatures that were not qualified for the ballot, that were out there collecting more signatures to get up to the amount that we needed under our cure period.
That's a little confusing for people who are not into it. So let me see if I got it. So the late-term abortion ban, put in their signatures, didn't have enough signatures, but there's a period to what they call cure, which is to go out and get a few more signatures.
Right.
You guys were in that period when Corona shut it down. Right. And this executive order to allow online signature gathering does not apply to this.
The order to...
And you think that's purely political?
I do. The order to allow online signature gathering and the order to extend the 6-month period that we've talked about, the 6 months that you have to collect signatures, specifically exempts our initiative. And we had to start our cure period on the 15th. That night at about 11 o'clock, he put out the order to allow everybody else to do it a different way, and then exempted us from the order. If you were truly concerned about the health, safety, and welfare, and that's why you passed this order, because it was an emergency and it's a pandemic and we can't have signature gatherers out there because it's such a health crisis, why would you exempt the one initiative that is hit the ground running to try to go get their 10,000 signatures? It doesn't make any sense unless it's politically motivated. And so we filed a claim in federal court alleging viewpoint discrimination by the governor.
Viewpoint discrimination. I don't know that term.
It means he doesn't like our initiative, so he left us out.
There's thought that he likes another initiative, perhaps, the Family Leave Act, which is people are trying to gather signatures for that. There's also a progressive income tax increase that people are trying to get on the ballot.
And a cigarette tax.
And a cigarette tax.
Which he's been supporting for 2 years.
These could benefit from online petition gathering.
Yes, yes. And it could be a lot cheaper, too.
Could it be? I mean, I've been doing this a long time. It's one of the few areas I can say I know a lot about this. Gathering signatures is not as easy as people think, at least to do it if you don't have millions of dollars to throw at it. If you have millions of dollars, yeah, it's not a problem. But for regular guys, it's a real hurdle. And I've looked at the executive orders, and I'm not too sure exactly what they mean. I am more open to the idea of online petition gathering than you are in principle. But I'm trying to figure out if this is even workable in the short amount of time that it takes. If you're not right now, today, gathering signatures to get something on the fall ballot, it's not going to happen. So if you're waiting for this online thing to happen, I just don't think it's going to work.
Well, it depends how they implement the online. If it's like a change.org and you can just go on there and,
But we don't know what it is.
We don't know what it is. I mean, that's the problem. We don't even know what it is. And so we're probably not going to know what it is for a couple weeks. And I mean, it's just sort of brings more uncertainty into a process where we're supposed to have a lot of certainty, because there shouldn't be favorites and there shouldn't be some people who get on and some people who don't get on because we change the rules in the middle of the game.
If this did not discriminate against 120, the late-term abortion ban, would you be all right with it?
No, I still wouldn't be all right.
Still wouldn't be all right. No. You really don't like this idea.
No, but I think that exempting 120 undercuts his entire argument.
Let me contrast that with mail-in ballots. I hate mail-in ballots. I think taking our most treasured piece of paper, the ballot, the core of our democratic republic, and throwing them through the mail like grocery store coupons is a dangerous thing to do. The difference is with an online petition, if you sign in the online petition, that's pretty verifiable if the Secretary of State goes to you, calls you up, knocks on your door, sends you a certified letter, I don't know what it is, that yes, you wanted that on the ballot because it is a public record. But a ballot is a secret thing. And so we're never supposed to know how you voted. We just know that you did vote, or maybe you thought you voted, but you didn't. Good point, bad point?
Well, I mean, at least
you look so unconvinced.
Yeah, at least with ballots, the way Colorado does it, you verify the signature on the way in. And at least there is a check on it. I mean, they're not going to be verifying signatures on initiatives. That's not part of the process. They're not going to be knocking on people's door and asking them if they actually signed it. That's not part of the process. And so, electronic, there's fraud everywhere, right? There's fraud in banking, and there's fraud in insurance, and there's fraud in testing, and all kinds of electronic things. I mean, anybody who thinks that there's not going to be an attempt at fraud in the petition process, I mean, we've had fraud even in the way we do it now.
Talk to me about mail-in ballots.
Okay.
Now that, and you've got a lot of experience as Deputy Secretary of State for so many years, how secure is our mail-in ballot system? And now that every state in the country seems to think, oh, you guys in Colorado, you've been doing it right for so long, have we?
Well, I think at least our system was adopted over really a 10-year period. We started out with absentee, and that number went up, and eventually we had like 70 people on permanent mail-in lists, and then we went to the all-mail system. I mean, the problem with the conversation that's happening...
You say 70 people or 70%?
70%. All right. I mean, the problem with the conversation we're having now is it's become totally partisan, and everybody who's against mail ballots is trying to suppress the vote, and everybody that's for mail ballots is trying to promote fraud. And when you have sides that are just, trying to use those talking points, it just becomes hard to have an actual conversation about it. The problem is going to be pushing states that aren't ready to do mail ballot into mail ballot. And we're not just talking about conservative states or liberal states, blue or red. I mean, out on the East Coast, they don't do mail ballots. And that, those states aren't involved in the process. It's really more of a Western type thing. Probably, we're a little more spaced out, and people in the West just liked voting mail ballots more, and people on the East Coast, preferred the polling place. But the problem is going to be pushing it on these states that don't know how to do it, because it's not that simple. When you go to a polling place and they check your name off a list and they can see which ballot you're supposed to vote, that's one thing. But when you're talking about millions and millions of people, we have a number of places that are going to be our single points of failure, right? We have printers. These ballots have to be printed in like a 2-week window from the time you certify a ballot to the time that you mail out a ballot.
They need to be serial numbered, and
yeah.
I mean, you're basically, the analogy would be the United States, Federal Reserve, they're printing dollar bills, and you have to make sure there's the right amount of dollar bills, and each one has a serial number. Yeah. Ballots are a little bit the same way, aren't they?
Well, yeah, and it's even worse because everyone's got to get the right ballot style, and your ballot looks different than my ballot because you have different races you're voting on than I'm voting on. And so the printers, I mean, it's not just going down to, Kinko's. The printers have to take the voter files and get the ballot styles right and get the codes on the envelopes so that we know which ballot we're pinging in. And then they have to stuff them and mail them. And oh, by the way, we need the post office to do that. And who's Denver trying to shut down right now? The Central Mail Facility. And so, there's another point of failure. We're going to have a post office that's just going to be overwhelmed during that period. So, I mean, it works kind of because not every state does it, but Colorado's got to print their ballots out of state. If every single state is rushing to go find a printer, they're going to be completely overwhelmed. There aren't enough printers. I mean, do you think printers right now is like a boom business? I mean, nobody's printing.
One of the reasons I think conservatives dislike the mail-in ballot is they don't trust it, and conservatives are conspiratorial by nature.
Sure.
But there's also a reason, which is conservatives don't know how to exploit the system. The reason why progressives love the system is because they're just better at vote chasing. What people don't quite get is that with a mail-in ballot, you don't have election day, you have an election month. And every day, the Secretary of State says, here's who's voted. And the left's databases are so good, they know if you vote, that'll be good for them. But if I vote, it'll be bad for them. So they're going to be knocking on your door, they'll be ringing your doorbell, they'll be calling and emailing and texting, and they'll come to your door and get your ballot. They won't get mine. And it's only because their systems of doing that is so much better. That's how they win. You can call it vote harvesting, but there's nothing illegal about it. It's just that they use the system. Conservatives are just not that organized. They don't have the same infrastructure to go out and chase down those ballots the same way. That's a failing of conservatives, not of liberals.
Well, it might be a failing of thought to some extent, I suppose, because conservatives are harder to wrangle because they're all so independent in their thought. Yeah. So they don't march along. But I mean, that same scenario happens in early voting. It would just be a matter of driving people to the polls instead of going to get their mail ballot.
But it's a whole lot easier to grab their ballot,
sure,
or steal it out of the mailroom at your apartment complex than it is to actually drag them to a polling place. So
right.
I can see the ease with that.
But at least we have verification of the signature on the way in. I mean, the places
Do you put a lot of stock into that?
I do.
Really?
Yeah.
Is for the half second that a human being looks at my voter file, which I don't remember when I signed the voter registration, 40 years ago or something.
That's not the signature they use.
What signature do they use?
They use the most updated signature that they can capture, usually from DMV. The system talks to the Department of Motor Vehicle System.
So when I sign my driver's license.
Yeah, or when you sign a ballot.
Which could be 10 years
Or
ago.
when you sign a ballot.
Really?
Yeah. It substitutes your most recent signature in the file. But there's two people that look at it. It's a bipartisan team, and they have to pass it through. And if they don't, then it goes to a secondary process. And if they don't pass it there, you get a letter in the mail. I mean, that is at least a check on it. Where we've seen the fraud, and where we will see it if every state implements it, is that not every state has a file of voter signatures that that talk to the election system. So, like in North Carolina, they had that case back in 2018 between, I think it was in a primary or maybe it was in the general, but it was a House race, a U.S. House race, and they had to throw it out because of the fraud in the absentee ballot system because they weren't checking the signatures. Absentee ballots were just coming in, and so then you really can go harvest them because all you can just take them out of people's mailboxes and mail them in, and who knows?
Do you feel that Colorado's vote by mail system is, nothing's 100%, but do you believe it's pretty safe? What I mean by that is that there's not a lot of planned mischief with it. There's not a lot of fraud.
Yeah, I do. I believe it's safe, and I think part of the reason is because we also have a paper copy of every vote. And so if you're voting on an electronic machine, there's always going to be kind of a, is that real? Did somebody go vote a bunch of extra ones, or did somebody hack the machine or something like that? You can go redo an election in Colorado, anytime.
When you say redo, recount it.
Recount it. You can go recount
but
it.
But I sign my ballot, or let's say somebody steals my ballot, signs it with something that looks like my signature. They open it up, they put the ballots in a big box. There's no way to fix that if they voted the way that I would not have voted.
Right. There's no way to fix it unless there's enough of those that you can claim an election contest. If you have a really close election, you can do a contest in Colorado to say more illegal votes came in than the margin.
Hey, we're going to run out of time, but I want to talk to you about Senator wannabe Hickenlooper, and you're everywhere. Every time there is somebody wanting some governmental information, there's Suzanne Staiert, just always in the middle of the article.
I'm exhausted.
It is. What do you want from poor John Hickenlooper?
I just want him to answer the question.
Which question?
The questions about his trips and his travel and his ethical issues, and he doesn't want to come to the hearing.
Give more background for those of us who don't quite follow. This is the Colorado Ethics Commission.
It is, and back in 2018, actually, the Public Trust Institute, I wasn't with them at the time, they filed a complaint against Hickenlooper for taking gifts in violation of Amendment 41. Amendment 41 says you can't take a gift of more than $59 from any person. And he had 5 separate sort of private jet trips that he went on, and then another trip to Bilderberg, which is like I don't even know what it's like. An international conference of interesting people.
Yeah, I think it's where the rich and famous go out in Europe and plan the takeover of the world.
Yeah, that's what the
it's
seminars,
a cool place to be.
I would imagine. Yeah. I can only imagine.
I'm against it because I haven't been invited.
Okay, yeah. Well, you're certainly an interesting person, so maybe your time will come. But
I'm waiting.
Yeah, but he went to that conference. He didn't pay for the conference. He didn't pay for the rooftop cocktails and everything else that went with it, and it was sponsored by Fiat Chrysler. So that's an illegal gift. And then after that, he took 5 separate sort of private jet flights with his friends. All
right, so what's the beef? He shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And now it's up in front of the Ethics Commission.
Right. And it's just been the longest. You know, we tried to get it to a hearing a year ago. We've tried to get it to a hearing the entire time. Well, then we were supposed to go to hearing and COVID happened. And so they put off the hearing. And so then now it's scheduled for June 4th. But it's supposed to be on WebEx, which is what the courts are using right now for remote hearings.
Right.
And they're objecting to appearing by video because they can't be in the same room. And
the governor. And
Which actually we don't have a problem with that. I think that, you know, due process allows you to be in the room with your attorney. So we didn't object to them wanting to continue it to a live hearing. But the Ethics Commission said it anyway. And they said, well, we're going to hear it on June 4th. So now they're saying, well, if you do that, he's not going to come. So,
he's not going to come to his own hearing.
Yeah.
Well, you can understand that he's got to smell a setup that this is a no-win situation. Every reporter will be there. It's got, you know, the governor answering ethics questions. Nobody wants that.
Well, and he could get beat by a girl, so that's no fun.
That girl being you?
Yeah.
Not bad. What do you think is going to happen with it?
I don't know. I think that they may hold it off until they can do it in person. And again, we don't object to that. That's fine. That's the way the court rules are written right now.
At the end of this, though, what is it you're trying to accomplish? Which is you want him to answer what specific questions in front of the commission? Well,
we want him to answer questions about, you know, did you take this trip? Did you reimburse this trip? You know, how were you invited to this trip? Who were you? What was the purpose of the trip? All of those kinds of questions that go into, you know, what he was doing there, whether it was a gift to the state or a gift to him. You know, who else was there influencing him at the time? I mean, he's just sort of lived this life of glitterati while he was the governor. And, you know, the Constitution says you're supposed to serve, you know, for the purpose of the people and not benefit yourself while you're in office. And it just sort of looks like he spent a lot of time looking for the VIP, you know, sign.
Listen, when I become governor, that's all I'm doing is the VIP. You can come and get me later, but I worked hard to get there. I'm going to the rooftop cocktail party. That's the cheese of it all.
That's fine, but you should pay for it. If you want to go to the rooftop cocktail party and you want to interact with all the CEOs and the glitterati from international, then just pay for it.
But I'm doing it for Colorado. As
How?
I'm schmoozing those guys on the rooftop at the Bilderbergs, and I convince them to locate in Colorado, that is easily a governmental expense. How is that not a governmental expense? Yeah, I'm having a nice martini with Elon Musk, my good buddy, and who knows, maybe we'll get Tesla.
Well, that's not what Amendment 41 says you're supposed to do.
You and the law. You're always like, follow the rules.
That's not what the people passed. I mean, that amendment passed overwhelmingly, and it says the state should pay for state's business. The state should not be paid, state's business should not be paid for by private corporations for obvious reasons. You know, they're there to lobby their interests, and they're trying to influence people through those lobbying efforts. And so that's what the people said when they passed Amendment 41. You can go do all those things that are for state business, but the state's got to pay for it.
All right, so you're telling me, I want to be clear on this. When I become governor, I can still go to the same party. I just have to have the state pay for it, not Chrysler Fiat.
Exactly.
I don't care who pays for it as long as it's not me. That doesn't sound like too bad.
Well, except the state probably wouldn't pay for your cocktails, but yeah.
What's going to happen
Or your
with
private jets. You know, they like you
Yeah.
to fly coach. They don't pay for that.
Incredible.
I know.
What else is hot on the Suzanne Staiert hit list right now?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. It's just everything. Every time I try to sit down to do something else.
Tell me about the Public Trust
Institute. So that's a nonprofit that was created back in 2018, and we do ethics and Cora stuff, and we have a couple Cora cases that
Those
are
who don't
pending.
know, Cora
right
is
now.
our Freedom of Information Act. So yes.
We have two cases pending on Cora violations. One, CDPHE. They put out that oil and gas report last, I don't remember, but all about the health risks. So we did a Cora, and actually back in July of 2018, they paid $500,000 for a, quote, final report. And then there was a change order. And they changed, it looks like maybe the air module. Yeah, they changed like the way they were going to measure. And so we asked for the, quote, final report. Because then the report that we all got to see didn't come out then for another year and a half. And so when we did the Cora, we said, well, what did you pay for back in 2018? And did you ask the scientists to change the science? That's what we're trying to find out. And they won't give us whatever the report was in 2018.
I think
so we filed the claim.
From a layman's point of view, the important thing to know is that Colorado has not only open meetings, which means that you get to see your government at work doing their things, except for a couple really small exceptions, personnel business, executive sessions, but they have to be recorded anyway. And also, you get to see the papers. You get to see the emails. You get to see when they're doing their business, who said what when, because it's your government. And people don't realize that they have the right to see that stuff. So you're one of the lead attorneys in the state to say, yeah, we'd like to see that.
Right.
And I'm always amazed, talk to me really briefly about this. I'm always amazed that some governments, and there's thousands of governments in Colorado, you say, I'd like to see this, and they go, oh, here it is. Let me send you that file.
Right.
And some go, yeah, we can do that, but it'll cost you $5,000 in staff time. And it seems to be completely arbitrary.
It is, yeah. We have another case against HCPF, which is the healthcare and insurance. They charged us upwards about $6,000 for records related to the public option, which really those should have just been put online. I mean, if you were going to do a public option study, why wouldn't you just put everything online? But they charged us $6,000, and then they still held back a number of them. And it took them like 8 months or 6 months to comply. And the law says you're supposed to give up those records within 10 days. Yeah. So we've gotten a lot out of our opens records requests. I mean, we found out that Hickenlooper's paying his attorney fees for this ethics case out of the 9/11 recovery fund, $525 an hour for a private attorney. Paid for by the 9/11 recovery.
$520 an hour?
25.
Oh, okay.
25. $525 an hour. So out of the 9/11 recovery fund. So that's a whole nother story how that came about. But,
People want to get information about Public Trust Institute. Where do they go?
publictrustinstitute.org. It's online.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Suzanne, thank you. I'll let you get back and save the world.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.